kind of quite interesting. Anyway, thank you so much for having me here today. That's my face. I'm Charlie Webster. I'm a broadcaster, and I've done so many various different things in my career. I've hosted Wimbledon twice, the Olympics once, meant to be twice, which I'll explain in a minute. World Cups, world title fights. I was the first woman to host a boxing in the world. Gosh, I've done all sorts of different things. I made some documentaries, and I used to compete when I was a teenager as a runner. And now I've kind of really changed because I'm going to Uganda on Sunday to make a film about malaria. I'll get onto that in a minute. I'm writing a book at the moment, which is about, which I think you'll all find really interesting, because in writing the book, I wanted to talk about my journey, which I'm going to talk about. But what I found myself doing is talking so much about the power of the relationship between my mum and me, and that complexity, and also human spirit and human strength, which I really believe, plus medicine and plus the incredible work that you all do or going to be doing, it saved my life. And doctors actually said that it was the strength I had is the only reason why I'm here today, and doctors actually said that. So I'll get onto my journey, because Becky mentioned nicely about Rio. So you cycled as a team of 10, but here?
Yeah, so what we did was we started the run to Rio in the distance, which is about 3,000 miles. In the space of about 6 weeks. So we all had to log miles.
Yeah.
So the idea was that you all tried to ride a certain number or walk or run a certain number of miles a day to get you there. So we did it broken down as teams, so everyone had to do 300 miles essentially in 4 weeks. So that's what we
that's good and hard as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to sound like I'm about to trump you now, but so anyway, what I did was, I cycled the whole 3,000 miles in one go in 5 weeks. Every single day from London. So I set off from the London Olympic Park on a bike and all the way to Rio. I know there's a bit of sea and ocean in the way, but we did obviously catch a flight, because everybody goes, "How did you get across the water?" And like, got on a plane. But we cycled all the way to the very south of Portugal, basically, flew to the very top of South America, and then cycled to Rio. And it was for charity, and it was amazing, but horrible, and amazing and horrible at the same time. And like every day, I woke up and I could hardly move. And it got to the point where the last week I couldn't bend my knees. That's how bad my legs are. So I was kind of walked like this. But then once you were on a bike, you were fine, because I wasn't used to walking. So I spent 5 weeks where I literally, all I did was step off my bicycle and then go in some God forbid place where we were staying, lie down for a couple of hours, and then go again. And then we got to Christ the Redeemer. I don't know, has anybody been to Brazil or from Brazil? Or, yeah. So Christ Redeemer is kind of like this, and we cycled all the way to the top, and that was our final mile. And it was kind of weird, because I wanted it to finish, because, to be honest, I don't mind saying this, they might say the same thing about me. There were 6 of us, and I was the only woman, and I had had enough, like, I'm not joking, up to here of, sorry, the couple of men, 3, 4 men in the room, of male ego. And so I kind of, but I think we'd all kind of had enough, because the thing about doing those things is it's not about the physical in the end, it's all about the mind. And doing that every day, I mean, it's amazing to see Brazil, but the boredom of seeing that road and, everybody else's struggle. And anyway, got to the top. I kind of want to build a bit of a picture, because it's kind of quite weird what happened to me. And I was doing like some phone interviews for 5 Live. I was cycling. They were like, "Oh, how's it feel? Like, you've done it." And I was like, "Oh my God, yeah." What? Like, it's kind of crazy. And so got to the top, but I didn't feel right. And like, you might have guessed, I mean, I've been up since crack of dawn, I'm sure we all have, and I've been giving different talks, but I'm a real energetic, hyper person. And I got to the top of Christ Redeemer, having cycled 3,000 miles, which is, pretty an amazing achievement for charity, and like, it meant so much to me. And I was just kind of like this. I was like, I don't really feel right at all. And that was my first thing that something wasn't right. And I just kind of was like, and then I remember looking over Christ the Redeemer and thinking, oh my God, and it kind of hit me. I was like, this is incredible. I'm so lucky. Like, I always wanted to go to Rio. I'd never been, and all these amazing thoughts. And then like, I believe in God. So, you know, I prayed to Christ the Redeemer and was like, thank you for giving me life. All these things that were so contradictory to what was about to happen to me. And then, yeah, kind of cut it short a little bit and skip forward. I went to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. I'd already done one live, so don't know whether you know Gethin Jones, he's a presenter as well, and he was in the Olympic Stadium in London, and he was like throwing live to me, going, oh, do you like Gethin? Yeah, you're like, yeah, Gethin! Sorry, he's not here and it's me. But he's a nice guy. He threw to me live, we call it throw to me, live, and he was like, hey Charlie, hand over to you in Rio, and I was like, oh, great. And the camera was on me, and literally inside I was in bits, and as soon as the camera went live off me, I was just like bent over, kind of like could hardly move, and I was like, what is going on? And I'm sure you're all the same in your jobs. I was kind of like, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, I'm about to, you know, present on the Olympics, and I was supposed to be the person who would interview all the gold medalists from Team GB. I was doing stuff for the States too, and I was like, I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. I'm not going to be ill. And then got to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. And anybody that kind of knows my story might know this bit, because this is kind of the bit that sometimes I mention and talk about, is I basically I couldn't do anything in the end. And like I couldn't even go on camera. And I ended up lying on the floor in the stadium. And you know, I'm sure you've all been to stadiums and it's like concrete. It's not like nice toilets. It's like concrete floors. And I just lied on the concrete floor for, I don't know how long, ages. And I was starting to bleed, like out of my bum and like out of my mouth and like out of my nose. And I was kind of like, this is really bad. And I had the most horrendous diarrhea. And then I was just being sick all the time. And I was kind of like, I felt like I couldn't, you know, when you get like gastroenteritis or like sickness and you're like, dare I move from the toilet? You know, dare I not? And then in the end, I managed to take myself away from the opening ceremony. Ooh, slow it out in a minute, don't worry. And yeah, and then I was like, oh, what is going on? I must have got like a bug or something. At that point, little did I know that I was hemorrhaging and I had kidney failure, but I had absolutely no idea. Thank you. I thought that, you know, I'd cycled 3,000 miles. What an idiot. Serves me right. You know, how do I expect to arrive in, all this stuff was going in my head, arrive in Rio and be fine. And I know you've had various people speak to you, and I think there's been like people with like kidney disease. It's quite interesting. I had an acute kidney injury, and it's really interesting how quickly my kidneys just went and stopped working. It wasn't kind of like a progressive thing at all. And bearing in mind, like the day before, I'd cycled 100 miles. We were cycling around 100 miles a day. You know, that's a big feat in itself, just cycling 100 miles. So my body was, you know, kind of fine because it cycled 100 miles. And then I got to the hospital because I was like, maybe I should go and see a doctor. And the doctor gave me 2 drips and then sent me away. I was like, okay, and said I was severely dehydrated. And I think it was a slight mistake that I told the doctor what I'd done, maybe. I don't know whether that kind of swayed their thinking towards me because, you know, I cycled all that way, so they probably thought, what an idiot. No, they probably thought like she's just dehydrated. So they gave me 2 drips and I went away and I just got worse and worse and worse, you can imagine. And I started to get really scared, really distressed because I was in a foreign country. You know, I had some work colleagues there, and I was kind of emotionally really tired as well because I'd cycled all that way, and I'd fought really hard to get there. Anybody that's done anything like the challenge you did, it takes a lot of incredible mental strength, and it's exhausting emotionally to do. And I went back in the hospital because by this point I could hardly walk, and I kind of, I hope none of you have been in hospital abroad because I basically had to empty my wallet of credit cards before they even looked at me. So I kind of like put all the credit cards on the table. I had a few, and luckily, and And then they would look at me and I was, oh my God, my head was on the table and, you know, they kind of took whatever they took from the cards and then saw me. And then immediately I was, you know, admitted to hospital. And I was kind of like, oh, what, you know, kind of what's going on? Because at this point I was still convincing myself that I'd just got a bug or I was severely dehydrated. And I was like texting my agent going, don't worry, I just can't come in today. I'll be fine tomorrow. Just tell them to, I don't know, find somebody else or just like manage until I'm in tomorrow. And then I was left for 3 days in a hospital, which we are so lucky what we have. We're so lucky, and I know it's hard, and I don't work in the NHS, but I've seen it as a patient, and I think it's absolutely incredible, and I experienced the other side of it, and I'm so grateful to live in this country for that, for many reasons, but for that. And I was left in a hospital bed for 3 days, like covered in my own poo and sick, and kind of just had a curtain like next to me. And I remember like being so sick, I was kind of over the side and it was just kind of left on the floor. And I was, you can imagine kind of how like my heart was racing, like I was in like my stomach, I want to kind of describe what I was feeling. My stomach was like as if knives were kind of stabbing me, and like I felt like I could hardly even kind of be straight. I felt like I couldn't speak. I was slurring my words, but nobody really kind of did anything. And I was a bit like, okay, this is like really bad. And I kept saying, you know, I really need help, because I just kept being sick all the time and I knew something was bad. You know, I've done exercise since I was a kid, so I think that really helps you understand what your body feels like. And then the doctor walked through the curtain and just went in broken English, we need to move you to another hospital, you're dying. And I was like, yeah, yeah, exactly. And I was like, sorry? Like, and that's exactly how it was done. It wasn't like they'd said what was wrong with me, and they'd detected that I'd got like a bacteria, I don't know whether you probably might know, called Shigella. Yeah, and then they'd found that I got hemolytic uremic syndrome, but they didn't know what was causing it or why. And then they went, oh, your kidneys have failed. We need to get you on a dialysis machine. And like I found out since that I literally had my kidney failure for like that 3 days without anybody really picking up on it. And it was only because my body was so strong that I managed to kind of ride it out until they realized I needed a dialysis machine. But they didn't have one. So, yeah, you get the picture now. So then we had to wait 24 hours for me to be taken to another hospital that had an intensive care and that had a dialysis machine. Can you tell me what a dialysis machine looks like? Like, anybody, like...
Yeah, big, stand up.
Oh, how big is it?
Like, yeah, about that big.
So it's not like this big?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Because I'm curious, like, because the dialysis machine I had was like this big and made so much noise, and I just wondered if it was like an old-fashioned dialysis machine. I think it was. It was like, anyway, so they put me on dialysis, and I was like, what? And anyway, they transferred me to the intensive care. They put me on dialysis, and I was struggling to breathe at this point. But going to the dialysis, I was like, I don't know whether anybody's had dialysis here. I was like, hang on a second. I mean, I was 33, 34 at the time, and I'm really healthy, physically fit. I've never had anything wrong with me. And I was like, what on earth am I doing on a dialysis machine? Like, what? And I do have a granddad who isn't blood related to me. And the reason why I say that is because I know some of it can be hereditary. And he had kidney disease and a transplant. And they used to phone me up, my grandma and granddad, and love them so much. And they'd talk about dialysis all the time, and I'd be like, yeah. And then that came into my head, because sometimes you don't, entirely listen to people until it's in your situation. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then I remember it feeling, I was on dialysis for like 12 hours. And I remember being like so cold all the time, and they were like trying to put blankets on. Anyway, then I went in a coma, and I ended up being on a life support machine. And I'll show you, just to give an idea of kind of how, what it was like and how bad it was. I don't like looking at this picture, but I think it's important because of, I don't know how you, because it was only, yeah, can you see it there? That was only less than a year and a half ago. That's why I think it's really important to show, because I think people look at me and go, oh, you're better now, it's great. And yeah, I think it's really powerful. They thought I got brain damage as well, so they had like brain nodes on my head, and obviously I've got a life support machine in. I was really, really swollen as well. I weigh about 9 stone now, and in hospital I weighed 14 to 15 stone there. Yeah, and that's how much I was blown up. And also, there's like a restraint on my left arm, but actually what you can't see is underneath the cover, I had a restraint here and a restraint there because I could actually hear. So if you look at that picture now, I could hear everything that was being said, and they actually restrained me, which I don't think we do here. Because I was starting to figure out that it was only my left, I couldn't move my right. If I concentrated so hard on my left that I could do things in my left hand, not a lot, but I could kind of go like this eventually. But and then I could kind of move my head a little bit, and they saw it as having a fit. So then they tied me down, and then, yeah, I know. Yeah, I've had a great time. And they stopped, I think it's really important as well, because this morning I was talking a bit about the importance of patient centricity, as I said, and my mum was then stopped to see me so much, not because of her, because she was told that she was distressing me, which was actually the complete opposite, because it was her that I was fighting for. So I would only do it when she was in the room, because that's when I found enough strength in my heart and my soul to be able to try and communicate with her, to show that I was still alive, because I'd heard that I was brain dead and brain damaged, and that I was gonna die, and that I was dying, basically. And that's what I genuinely thought. I was like, I'm never gonna see my family again, my mom, and it still kind of, I have to put a little bit of a barrier, because sometimes when I talk about it, it still kind of makes me really upset, because it's something I'm still working through now. Shall I take the picture off? You've all seen it? No. I'll put this one back on. Yeah, that's much nicer. And then I had to have, I was on permanent dialysis, and I was having permanent blood transfusions. I had so many blood transfusions, over 50, to try and keep me alive. And it got to the point where I was aggressively resuscitated, and there's so much to tell, and I know you haven't got all afternoon, because I could talk for hours about it. And I want to try and make sure it's kind of, the focus is my kidneys, because I think in the press I had malaria, and a lot of what's talked about is malaria. Yet for me, my struggle is right to this moment I'm stood on this stage has been my kidneys, which I'll explain. And then it got to a point where they were like, no chance. She's literally got zilch chance. We can't figure out what else is wrong with her. We know she's got hemolytic uremic syndrome. We know she's got Shigella. She's got multiple organ failure. Obviously, my lungs are collapsed. I've got pneumonia in the lungs as well. I'd got hemorrhage on the brain. So that was it. And then last minute, by the way, they tested for everything under the sun. And then on a last minute whim, it was a female doctor. I don't know why that's relevant, but I think it's important to say. International Women's Day. Men are amazing too. I genuinely believe that. I don't want, I think it's important to say that. But it was a woman doctor called Dr. Cecilia, who on a last minute whim tested for malaria, because she'd sent my notes off to Washington, randomly. And they said, test her for malaria. And she was like, and the doctors didn't want to test me for malaria. And she was like, no, I'm going to test her for malaria. So they got my blood sample, tested for malaria, but they didn't have the testing facilities, so they had to send my blood to San Francisco. I have no idea what would have happened. I probably wouldn't be stood here talking today if that blood hadn't been sent, because then it got sent back and it was positive, glaringly positive, but a rare form of malaria, so maybe, I don't know, that's why they didn't see it. And then immediately they tried to treat me for malaria and gave me everything you know, Primaquine, everything they could that they had in their stock room. And I started to react to it. And obviously I came out of the coma. The malaria has gone. Like I was treated for the malaria mainly. And then I got repatriated back to England, but I spent a month in that hospital. And it was really, really tough, like really tough, because I didn't think I was who I was anymore. I felt like I'd lost my identity. I was like really battling with my own head. You know, my lungs were still really, really bad. I could hardly breathe. I was on oxygen for a long, long, long time. And then even when I was repatriated, I was taken on a medical plane with 2 doctors, and that were really amazing. They were German, actually, and they were the stereotype, which was amazing because I needed that. They were like, right, come on, we'll sort this out, don't worry. And we had to make like 5 stops. It took 20 hours to get from Rio, 5 stops, because I was that ill. And even on the plane, they were constantly treating me, and I had to have dialysis, like, I think, I can't remember, like 3 sets of something for about 12 hours to make sure that I could have 20 hours to fly. And then as soon as I landed in the hospital, then they had to immediately put me on, thank God for you, it's like 10 minutes. And they had to immediately put me on dialysis again, because then I was sent to a renal unit. So I had tropical diseases and all sorts of diseases coming out, because I had chikungunya as well, which is also from a mosquito. So yeah, I think I was a bit unlucky on that front. But actually then, when I got back to England, it didn't become about tropical diseases anymore. Like there was a few other things, but it was mainly about my kidneys. And so I was put on the renal unit and on dialysis. And I had an amazing consultant called Dr. Lewington. I don't know if you ever know. And he was so fantastic with me, but he said to me that it doesn't look like my kidneys would work again. And I was absolutely devastated, because what I do is very active. I love to run, and I love to run not for my physical, but for my mental health. So I was like if I've got stress or something bad's happening in my life, I'll go for a run. It helps me so much. So I was like, what on earth am I going to do with my life if I have kidney failure? I mean, you know, I went through the process of, I'm so lucky to be alive. So I don't want to mistake as in that wasn't there. It was there. It was like, oh my God, I'm so lucky. I thought I was going to die, or all these things. But then once I realized I was alive, it was about the quality of life and I think everybody's different, but that it meant to me, and that meant so much to me. And so we, you know, carried on with the dialysis, and he took a risk on me, and he pulled me off dialysis because he said I was so young and I was so fit that he wanted to see if my kidneys would start to do something now that my body was starting to kind of come back, and you know, I had to learn how to walk again, all those things at the same time. And so he left my kidneys, and I had to like drink about, I think it was 5 litres, and then measure the wee and try and all these things. And I started to wee because I wasn't weeing for a long time. And then my kidneys, like a tiny, and some of you probably know way more than me about kidneys, started to do something, whatever it is they do, like, and he was like, oh my God, like, you know, your kidney's working like above whatever, like 3, 4, 5%, whatever it was. And I think it was like 10, 11%. So they were like, let's keep her off it. And then they started to increase again and increase again and increase again. And by the time I left hospital, they were at 18%, which was huge compared to the fact that they said that I would have kidney failure, and that was that. And my kidneys were so badly damaged from the malaria and from being in the coma for so long as well. And also the fact that I didn't get to a dialysis machine, you know, within whatever, 12 hours of having kidney failure. Like I literally had 4 days without having, you know, my kidneys were completely, I'd had enough. And then that became my fight. So I came out of hospital, and it became like the ongoing thing where I got tested, you know, can't remember, every couple of days, I think it was. And it was like, what percentage of your kidneys at? What percentage of your kidneys at? And literally it was like the thing that my friends and my family, and it was like the kind of, you know, fight anyway. And they just started to get better and better and better. And now, I'm just conscious of the time. I've got so much more to say. 3 minutes left. 5 minutes left, thanks. I got an extra 2 minutes. And because I kind of want to tell you where it is now and show how important it, you know, like the recovery of kidneys are and how kind of that kidney injury works, because everybody says to me, oh, you look great, you're 100% recovered. Everybody says that to me, and that's amazing, and I'm so grateful for that, but that's not how I feel inside 90% of the time, because I still don't feel like me. You know, I suffered, I don't know, any of you read, but I've spoken about it. And it took me a lot of courage to speak about it, because I kind of quite a private person, despite what I do. And I find vulnerability quite hard, and I like to be the strong. But I think I'm learning that vulnerability is so important, because I suffered really bad post-traumatic stress disorder when I came out of hospital, like really bad. You know, I had panic attacks, flashbacks, nightmares, and I still get a lot of physical feelings from, because I had my dialysis in the end was all through my neck, and they just moved it all the time because it was getting infected, and obviously the life support machine, and so I get a lot of weird feelings around my neck still, and I don't like anything too tight around it or kind of anybody touching it, and then I'm like, well, my kidneys aren't okay. So yeah, I look great, but my kidneys still aren't okay, and even this day, I'm kind of like, they're working nowhere near, they're kind of like half of what they were before I set off on that cycle ride. And, you know, I can live and I'm fine and stuff, and I take so much health precaution. You know, there's certain things that I don't eat, like high potassium foods, I don't drink alcohol anymore, because they advise me, because the actual tissue of the kidney is so scarred, which is why it's kind of quite remarkable that they're working. It left with a lot of cysts and a lot of scars on my kidneys. But the doctors said it was because, I was so healthy that my kidneys started to work, which I think is one real thing I'd like everybody to take away, because I know it's World Kidney Day today, but for me, like, and any of you who are kind of consultants in renal, he was like, I've never seen somebody with such bad damage and they work, and he accredited it because of how healthy and how much reserve they had in the first place. And, you know, I'm not kind of one of these mad whatever, but I do a lot of exercise, and I eat really well, and I drink loads of water. And then the other thing is, I was like, there was a recent thing that came out, I don't know whether you saw it, and I don't know whether any of you were involved, about like kidney injury in running, and marathon running. Did anybody see it? No. And I was like, oh my God, no. This is the final thing I'll finish on. It was a study, and people were saying that marathon running and running was like bad for your kidneys. And then I was like, oh no, because my goal, and I haven't done it yet, just to bring it back to now and finish up, because I know there's another speaker coming in, is to be able to live my life again, and I am, but to be able to run, I've done a lot of marathons, I'd really like to do a marathon again. I'd really like to do one of those crazy challenges, because initially, and my family were like, no, you've got to pipe down and behave, and what I put them through. But then I was like, well, what was the point of me surviving in the first place if I can only live half my life? I want to live my best life, and to me that's so important. And with it, I'm working really hard myself to try and get my kidneys in a good place. But it kind of feels weird for somebody that was so healthy before to have a kidney problem. And I suppose I'll finish it there, because I know we're kind of short on time, but I think it was really important for me to come today, because I know it was difficult. We've had to change times and stuff, because believe it or not, this job isn't that easy. Like, our schedules kind of get really hectic and really back to back, but it was really important for me to come down here today because I think that I associate kidney disease and I didn't even know what kidney injury was, I just knew what kidney disease was, to older people. And I think, you know, even when I was lying in the hospital, I was like, I'm fine. Like, there was a lot of people in intensive care that were a lot older than me that were in so much pain. And I remember thinking, oh God, I wish somebody'd help them. Like, I'm fine, I'm young and like fit, you know, but I wasn't okay. And I think it's really important. I wanted to kind of, be here to be able to show and say what kidney injury felt like for me, because I think there's a real lack of awareness in my mind. It might not be in kind of your world, but in public perception of what, one, how important kidneys are, two, that kidneys is something that you get when you, a problem with your kidneys is something you get when you're older, so don't worry about it. And I think it's really important that I tell my story. I tell it from various different perspectives. I work a lot in malaria now because it was kind of a shock that I had malaria. But I think it's also important that I kind of highlight the kidney side of things. But I'm doing okay, and I'd like to say thanks so much for you all to having me. And also, like, I don't know whether, is there any time questions or not? Yeah. Oh, great. Definitely. Because I normally overrun so that nobody gets to answer a question. And but yeah, if you want to ask me any questions, like, you can honestly ask me anything. Like, I'm really fine with it, and it doesn't have to necessarily, well, maybe it does have to be about kidneys, but but yeah, but it can be about anything. Really, I don't know. Really. Or is there anything anybody more like me to talk on, or? Oh yeah, thanks. 6 days. But I'm really nervous about it because I haven't been given, I shouldn't be saying this because it's being recorded. I haven't been 100% given the all clear yet, and I fly on Sunday, and I'm making a film with the Commonwealth as well and the Malaria Consortium because of kidneys, because they're kind of quite cautious about giving me antimalarials because of how soon, how kind of close that picture was, and how my kidneys still aren't, they haven't settled yet, so they're so up and down. Like, one minute I go to the doctors and they're like, oh, this is improved, and then the next minute they've deteriorated, and I'm like heartbroken. I come out and I'm like, this is quite a funny story, like I think it was about 2 months ago, I was like in the hospital and my kidneys really deteriorated, and I kind of left, and I was so upset and I was so angry with my mum, and I was kind of like, she was like, come on, let's go to Lidl. She loves Lidl. We were like walking around Lidl, and I was kind of like smashing the basket on things because I was so angry, because I was like, I am doing everything right. Why on earth can't my kidneys work? But yeah, but I am going to make a film about malaria, and so hopefully it'll raise some amazing awareness, and I'm going kind of right to the other side, to the really remote places, but I feel anxious about it because obviously I'm putting myself back in a really high risk area in something that nearly took my life. But for me, I feel like that's one of the reasons why I survived, and I didn't go through that fight to kind of run away from everything that I had to fight. Thanks for asking that question.
Can I just say thank you? I'm a patient myself. I've had 2 kidney transplants now.
Oh, wow.
And so to hear it from, to have anybody in the media always obviously helps with awareness. So keep telling your story. You're young, and that's a comment. What you were saying about people saying you were healthy, or you look all right, you're cured now. You've got that all the time. You don't look ill, you don't look like you've got any problems, you've got a transplant, now you're fixed. So keep telling your story, please, because
thank you.
You really need the
Did you speak today?
No.
Oh, you should. Well, that's amazing.
I do speak other places.
Yeah, you've had 2 kidney transplants. My granddad had one, and I know how, I've not been in that position, but I know how hard it is, and thanks for telling your story as well, because I think you're right, and I don't think it's a fashionable thing, is it? It's not something that, I think that's, no, but honestly, like, trust me, I work in the media, there's certain things that causes which are fashionable to talk about, and I don't think kidneys is, so I think it's really important that, hopefully I have a voice, and you too as well. Thank you.
I was going to say, maybe you could present for the transplant games.
The transplant have games.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the British Transplant Games happen every year around the country. Then the European Transplant Games, and then the World Transplant Games, which actually in 2019.
Oh my God, I loved it. So it's for patients that have had transplants?
Yeah, so whoever's had all the transplants.
That's amazing.
Obviously, in the UK, you have to select it. I don't know what the criteria is for countries, but select you get to represent the World Games.
And have you represented? Oh my God! I should be here. Well done. That's amazing. Oh, congratulations. Did you have a kidney transplant?
Yeah, I had one that 9 years ago. Last week.
Gosh, well, I'm sure you can relate to some of what I was saying. Well, you look amazing. Well done.
Does anyone have any other questions? I know there's probably lots of questions.
Are you keeping up with your running routine? Is that going okay?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I am. And that is something that I really was torn. And what do you compete in? Swimming, okay. Yeah, because of, I was kind of, like, I'm such a big runner, like I said, and it's really important that I said it for mental health. Because I don't know what I'd do if I didn't run. I don't know. I don't know how I would cope with stress or feeling depressed. So I've gone back into it, but slowly. But oh my gosh, I don't know whether you found this, but I could not run for toffee when I came back at all. Like, it took me, like, you know, I'd run for a minute and then I'd break down or I'd cry or I couldn't because of the breathing. And the couple of problems I have now is I'm kind of getting up to a good mileage, and now I'm like, I carry water all the time, but I'm kind of always in my head worried about my kidneys because they're not stable, the consultant said, so, you know, they could fail. So I'm like, am I being really responsible here? And then the second thing, but it's so important that I have that lifestyle. And the second thing is when I get out of breath too much, I get major flashbacks of being on the ventilator. So they're the two things at the moment that I'm kind of battling with. But at the same time, do you run? Yeah. Yeah, just say yeah. You're like, oh no, don't ask me a question back. But like running makes me feel alive as well. So it's kind of that real juxtaposition for me. So yeah, I am, and I love it. And I won't stop, because yeah. Anybody else?
I think we've got time for one more question. Is anyone going to be brave enough to put their hand on the phone up?
Thanks for not leaving me hanging there.
You believed in God when you were talking about like Christ and Redeemer. I wanted to ask, like, have you found your faith, like, how did that impact your journey when you were in the hospital and everything?
That is an amazing question. Wow, thank you. Yeah, because I wasn't brought up in a religious background at all, like quite the opposite, and I didn't, you know, have any influence of faith at all, really, apart from kind of my own belief inside me and my own fight. Like, I've been through various different traumas before this one in my young life. I don't know, I have publicly spoken about a few of them. And to me, I kind of felt like maybe I was going through these things for a reason, and I wanted to find a voice, which is why I went into broadcast. So maybe I didn't feel like I had a voice then, but I didn't kind of go to church, and I didn't really know what my relationship was like. And then about a year before this happened to me, I randomly walked in a church. I'm going to try, this is a long story, I'm going to cut it down. But I walked in a church and I was like, I'm so interested in this, because why did I walk in that church? It was the same, no, it wasn't a year, it was January of 2016. And that happened to me in August 2016. I walked into a church and started to go to church, like in London. And it was quite a young people's church, and it was like very modernised. But I really enjoyed it, and I started to really find what I believe, you know, everybody has their own beliefs, is God and God within me and what my purpose was. So yes, because then when I got to hospital and all that happened to me, I had such a strong like faith and sense of purpose. And I actually, this is another story, but I feel like I had a conversation with what I think was death. And some people have asked me about this, thinking, well, did you think it was God? And I was like, no, to me, that wasn't God. There was death, and I had to basically make a choice. And I feel like I made a decision whether I would live or not. And I remember if I went like that and just gave up, which I was very close to because I'd had enough, I was in so much pain that I would have just died. But I was desperately didn't want to, and I felt like it wasn't God's purpose, and I felt like it would absolutely kill my mum, and that I had to stay alive for my mum. And interestingly, my mum, well, I think it's kind of somewhere, but she never speaks about it, and she's not religious. And she said to me that she just looked up and was like, God, do not take her away from me. Do not take her away from me. And she was so strong with her conviction. And then since I've survived, it's got a lot stronger and kind of more exploratory. So like, I'm so intrigued by it. And I've also done quite a lot of spiritual work. Like I went to India at the beginning of January and started to learn how to meditate, because I'm so interested even now in my recovery, because I've still got PTSD, and I've been having, I've been battling with that now, as well as the kidney thing. That's become kind of the prominent thing. on looking inside myself to try and heal rather than looking outside, which has been really interesting because I am not the type of person that can meditate, but I've started to. Which is really interesting because I sit there and I'm like talk in my own head, but it's really changed me. So yeah, absolutely. And just to finish, I 100% believe that I was meant to be here. Thank you for asking that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's all right.